Freedom of speech. This past year, the term has been used by both the left and the right sides of the political spectrum, but for different reasons. Conservatives have been using it to defend themselves and their public speakers against angry leftists and Marxists who seek to shout down the opposition by calling it their own freedom of speech. Speakers such as Milo Yiannopoulos and Ben Shapiro have had their lectures interrupted by social justice warriors who feel that their own rights to not having their feelings hurt, which isn't a right, by the way, should trump the right to free speech for anyone who doesn't agree with them. Milo was even supposed to come to Guelph University up here in Canada to speak, but the talk was cancelled because students didn't feel safe. I would have loved to go exercise my right to attend his event freely, but unfortunately, Guelph campus crybabies couldn't handle other points of view and therefore decided that I shouldn't be able to either. These people take freedom of speech, the biggest indicator of a free society, for granted. Up north, we don't have freedom of speech. This past July, the Canadian government sued Mike Ward, a comedian, $42,000 because he insulted a child with a disability. Would I have made the jokes he did? Probably not. Were they offensive? Yeah. But to fine and potentially jail someone who is simply expressing their comedic perspective on something just because someone's feelings were hurt? Not okay. Just because you have hurt feelings doesn't mean you have the right to take someone else's rights away. Section 319 of the Canadian Criminal Code states, Section 319 prescribes penalties from a fine to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years for anyone who incites hatred against any identifiable group. The first thing I noticed about this is how vague the term incites hatred is. What does this even mean? In Mike Ward's case, it clearly meant that jokes made at the expense of others is a criminal offense. The problem with this law is that not only are the lines between their definitions of hate speech and free speech incredibly blurred and can potentially be manipulated case to case, but that hate speech isn't free speech anymore in the first place. If you have any public influence at all, you can't stand up at a podium and say, I don't like Asians, because now that's considered a hate crime. I'm not saying statements like, I hate black people are okay. I actually find those statements incredibly disgusting. What I am saying is that the government has no business stripping away people's rights to say those things. I once had a conversation with a friend who said that calling someone the N-word should be punishable with a fine and possibly jail time. Again, I think that word is revolting, but I could not disagree with his statement more. Why are we letting the government legislate morality when they can't seem to do anything else right? I mean, just look at the war on drugs, which has been an incredible failure, or the war on poverty, which has destroyed poor communities and black communities and stuck them on welfare. Now we want to have a war on hate speech? Yeah, that's working out well, especially in Europe. In places where political candidates are arrested for quoting former Prime Minister Winston Churchill, you're seeing the rise of actual extremely far-right racist movements. As Milo put it, sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you forcibly censor the shit out of everyone instead of letting the free market of ideas decide the verdict of people with actual racist and actual bigoted opinions, you are creating the exact circumstances in which movements like that are able to grow. I do think someone should be allowed to call someone else a chink to their face without legal repercussions. I condemn comments like that, but I would fight for anyone's right to say anything to anyone with my life. You know, as long as they're not inciting violence or threats or genocide, obviously. Why are we treating the government as this morally superior thought police? Didn't we secularize society for similar reasons? The separation of church and state was debatably the best possible move for maximizing individual and economic rights and freedoms, but we've let the pendulum swing too far in the opposite direction. Now instead of the church telling us what's moral and what's not, and censoring us and jailing us for blasphemy, we have the government doing the exact same thing. Except now we're starting to censor and jail people for disagreeing with letting in too many refugees or making jokes about Turkish politicians. I genuinely believe that social justice warriors and many politicians see themselves as these holy beings in a largely secularized world. They kicked out the church and religious people alike in an attempt to maximize freedom, only to replace that system with a system that resembles the one they were claiming to be against, the one where any dissenting opinions will not be tolerated, ever.